Hi, this is Varun. Good morning, everyone, for joining. I'll probably wait for another 15-20 seconds, waiting for some more people to join in, and then we'll start. Just a quick introduction. I'm one of the co-founders of Link CXO. We are trying to build an exclusive community of CXOs and senior leaders across verticals and industries so that they can actually engage in a meaningful way and create value and influence and lead and grow the professional and social world around them. The intent is to actually have a close-knit and voice-based community where our AI platform will enable intelligent matches, intelligent conversations, so that the leaders can actually share from their experiences and help and grow the community around them. I'll also, so we started this with Ganesh. We've spoken to a lot of people about their pain points, senior leaders, where they typically feel that platforms such as LinkedIn does not provide them that kind of opportunity, which is why we conceived this idea, and we've been working on growing this. Whoever's on the call, we would highly recommend, if you're not already on our platform, please go on our platform and start engaging with senior leaders. In addition to just having an invite-based platform where only there's an entry to barrier, because we control who's on the platform, there are certain sections. There is a AI-enabled chatbot that we have where you can have ready industry reports on any on either the latest industry reports or a specific topic within the industry. We have a repository of those reports. We also have daily news updates on the major events within the industry in our blog. We have a job section where you'll find exclusive jobs which are only for CXOs, typically something you'll not see anywhere else. We have an events section where we host webinars such as these, plus participants or users on the platform can actually host their own events. In addition to that, we also have a club section where members can create their own private clubs where they can only allow their chosen users to participate and engage only in that club, and they can be open clubs as well. So the intent is to have a community and give them all the tools to be able to engage meaningfully throughout their throughout their time on our on the app, on the Link CXO app. So, and I sincerely request everyone again who hasn't had a chance to either be on the app or become a user yet, please go and explore the app. And if you have any suggestions how we can make it better, please reach out to us. We always appreciate suggestions.
I think Varun, yeah, Priya, thankfully you managed finally. I think there was some problem with the link, I think.
Yeah, I guess so, because a lot of people were also reaching out to me saying they can't join. So anyway, we are back.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I think what we can do is, Anam, I don't know if you are still available. Maybe we can play that 1-minute video right now in interest of time.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that.
Hassled with too many irrelevant connection requests and messages? Let Link CXO connect you with the right opportunities and right people. With Link CXO, you can be part of an exclusive CXO community, organize and attend business events, and explore unique business opportunities. Our AI-powered chatbot delivers focused industry-latest news and reports. An exclusive platform for C-suite jobs and AI-enabled recommended matches. A value-based network to collaborate and share ideas and monetize opportunities. Collaborate through business events and meetups. Celebrate achievements and friendship. Enjoy exclusive offers and benefits from our premium business partners. We are building an exclusive community of senior leaders who can grow, lead, and influence the professional and social world around them. Come, be a part of us.
Thanks, Anam, for playing the video.
Thank you so much. to the audience and speakers. Two of them would be joining us very soon for sparing time on this weekend for this webinar, which is an initiative by Link CXO. So what I'll do is, I'll probably give a brief intro of the speakers who are going to be on the panel. Priya, who is the fortunate speaker to have joined in as of now, she's having more than about 20 years of leadership experience in various organizations like GSK, Johnson & Johnson, Abbott, and Ranbaxy, leading their commercial businesses. And she has worked in many therapeutic areas, many of them linked to the current topic we have today, including infectious diseases, immunology, vaccines, and many more global public health related programs, which were having this strong patient-centric focus. Along with that, she has been a recipient of multiple awards and recognitions like CMO Asia Marketing Award for Marketing Professionals of the Year, AVAX Brand of the Year Award, and also recognized by OPPI as one of the key women professionals in pharma who have been trailblazers. She is an active member of CII IWN Chapter for Women Leadership and is a mentor and coach to young upcoming women professionals, and also chairperson of POSH Committee in India. Welcome, Priya.
Thank you, Neeraj.
And then we have Dr. Dinesh with us. Dinesh has M.Pharm, PhD in Pharmaceutical Sciences with more than about 20 years of experience in pharma R&D. So he's currently working as Senior Director and Head IPR Jubilant Generics. And his core areas of expertise include IP due diligence of pharmaceutical products and technologies, which are meant for global markets like US, EU, Canada, Japan, Australia, and other rest of the world countries. He has more than about 80 patents as an inventor. He has got more than 10 research papers and book chapters in international journals. He's again member of CIA Committee on Intellectual Property Rights and also a resource person of various national and international conferences and training programs. And he was part of this strategic team who launched Remdesivir for COVID in more than about 120 odd countries very recently in August. So welcome, Dr. Dinesh. I don't know whether you are online as of now or not.
Yes, so for everybody's benefit, again, I didn't want this opportunity to just keep on speaking about Link CXO, but it has come to that now. While we have our speakers joining us, so just like the event that we held today is an important topic that everybody, whether they're industry experts or common man, people are curious about things. They want to know what's happening with the vaccine, and you read a lot of news about it, but it's very hard to separate the genuine from the spicy, in the lack of better choice of words. So, it's always, so our intent is to actually hold such events where we can actually have people who are in the know to tell us more about it, and engage in a conversation that will benefit us all, so that at least tomorrow when we leave the webinar, we know a little bit more than we did before. And that is the intent even on the platform, to have just people collaborate with each other. So when you're on the platform, our platform will send you matches, which is AI enabled based on your experience, what you've done. We also ask users what they're interested in, what are they looking for on the platform. Are they looking to generate an opportunity? Are they willing to advise people who need advice? Are they looking for a job? So those interests basically then help us identify and match people accordingly. And the intent would be to then have them sort of either chat on our app with each other or take it offline through exchanging of numbers, if they will, or exchanging of email addresses. And we are going to keep on having webinars. I think pharmaceutical is such a vast field that just covering one topic in 1 hour is just not enough. So we'll need I think many more such webinars, and we'll need many more such hours to engage in conversations that benefit us all, and especially now that we're grappling with technical issues, and you lose a lot of quality time that you could have used to have a good conversation. But hopefully, I'm just hoping everybody joins soon. I think there is some issue with Zoom only. I think the team is telling me there is some issue with Zoom, so we're trying to sort that out. I hope that gets sorted soon, and then we can finally start the webinar. But in the meanwhile, again, like I said, if you haven't been on the platform before, please do that. Priya, I would appreciate it if you can also be on the platform. Tell your associates and colleagues if they can be on the platform, because I think at the start we started something, but it's one of those things which is completely it has to be led by people to create value for themselves. So we can't beat that fact enough that the initiative has been started, but it's a chain, and the reaction will start with a single individual. So
I think we have Dr. Dinesh also joined in, fortunately.
Okay.
Hi Dinesh, can you hear us?
Yeah. I'm online.
So Priya, meanwhile, can you brief us regarding what challenges you had on your professional front within the organization during this lockdown or during this COVID era?
So I think, first of all, thank you, and I appreciate everybody coming together on a weekend like we mentioned. Plus, I can understand what's happening with technical challenges. So it's a good start to explain to everyone what happened when the lockdown started, and we just didn't know what's going on. We were all trying to get together and build an ecosystem around it. I think there were two things that happened within the organization. One was what was happening in the professional front, where people were trying to still come to terms with what does this lockdown entail, what is it going to mean, what is the kind of impact that's going to happen. And then on the personal front, it was impacting people in the same format, right? We were having issues that were coming up in terms of what is going to happen with the family. All of you are at home, simple stocking up of items which was required for a daily business running. But I think GSK, to an extent, and I will quote GSK, although I don't want to stand on this platform and talk about GSK, we were sort of, I don't think it was envisioned from a pandemic point of view, but the company had certain readiness in the past, which was more to enable technology and more to enable digital interactions with external customers and internal customers. So we had some headway that we had made in the past, and I think that got leveraged beautifully to good use. So from an organization perspective, there were three major challenges. One was exactly defining what do you do now? I mean, what is it that you can do in this scenario? Second was, how do you keep your internal customers and external customers engaged? And third is, how do you make sure, very critically, how do you continue to have access of medicines to patients? So across that continuum, I think we worked. So the primary thing of, what do you do now? I think very quickly the leadership teams got together. And in the first week or so, we were ready with our master plan on what we wanted to do. And it was iterative, as it was with everybody, I guess. From a customer internal, external engagement point, I think we, because of the platforms, because of a strong commercial excellence team that we have in the background and digital teams that were working, we were able to quickly get the teams onto upskilling, learning, building capability. And remember, GSK has a 3,000 plus force on the ground. So it's not a small thing, you're getting, and this is over and above this, you have people who are working in different sites, offices, etc. So keeping them connected, getting the HCPs connected, all this was happening. I'm just outlining it. And from the third perspective, I think where supply chain jumped in beautifully, we had logistics, management of medicine access to patients, to outcomes. In fact, one of our dealers was telling me a couple of days ago, saying, ma'am, we saw GSK really have probably one of the best supply chain systems, even compared to normal times. I think COVID actually got us into an acceleration mode. And we also looked at channel very beautifully. So one of the teams I lead, which looks at commercial trade channel, there we partnered with them, and I think hats off to all our healthcare workers. And while I say this, I also would say to the pharmacies and channel partners and all the logistic partners that they made sure that the access continued. At any point of time, I don't think we tried to reach out for a medicine and it was not available. So it was, I think it was beautifully led. So to sum it up, it showed us what technology could do. COVID has been an accelerator. It has actually shown us, what we wanted, planning to do, whether we could do it or not. And third, I think it's brought us into new ways of working. So everybody is working from home. I joke about it. I say we are living at work rather than working at home, and we need to get our head around how we can do that better. But I think it's given us a chance to view things in a very, very different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging for not only pharma industry, but industry in general also. I mean, I could imagine the reps might be feeling, I don't know what feelings they might have at home, because day in, day out, they were going and meeting the HCPs face to face. They might have faced their own challenges with respect to, reaching out to HCPs, and vice versa from doctor's angle also. They might be not receiving any kind of first-hand information straight away. And for them also, it might have been a challenge to migrate to the online platforms and other things for getting the educational stuff.
Absolutely. And just to add to the point that you mentioned, I think the adoption of technology, I think pharma, and I would blame ourselves for it, has typically viewed doctor as a very different entity, as something out of the blue, not as a consumer, as we should view them, saying that they are getting influenced by a lot of other platforms. They are on social media, they're looking at technology, they're doing a lot of stuff. And I think we went into digitization rather than digitalization. And that's where pharma learned what the big lessons are. 70% of the doctors, I think IQVIA did a study somewhere in July, August, were on telemedicine platforms. E-pharmacies had exploded through the roof. Like, they were 3% of market share. They were now reaching 70 million households. They are talking in the next 2 years, they'll be able to access. Our own local brick and mortar pharmacies were able to reach. So, and the communication platforms that HCP allowed us with the reps and the HCPs also changed dramatically. HCPs were talking to their customers differently. So all platforms which existed, which were like, getting the doctors together as an aggregator, now started looking at a synonymous synchronous journey across the patient life cycle as well as across the doctor life cycle. So I think that's where difference has come in, and we'll speak as we go with Dr. Ganguly and Dinesh, but I think it's been an eye-opener. It's been really an eye-opener in terms of access.
And Dr. Dinesh, since you are very, very well connected with the production departments, leading the IPR division of a big company. So what challenges were faced by manufacturing departments to reach out to and manufacture vaccines or other drugs in masses?
Okay, so good morning all. Yes, it has been a hard time for pharma, at the start of, lockdown in March. And there have been, so major issue was the supply chain issue. And pharma companies have, signed some agreements with the various suppliers. So, they were not able to, provide the supply. Then second was, closure of, premises, because at that time, standard operating procedures for COVID related were, ongoing, and so 1.5 months, actually, there was no activity on various pharma companies. But yes, in parallel, there have been collaborations between various companies we have seen, and which facilitated, prompt supply of the desired medicines, like hydroxychloroquine. You are aware, that was promptly developed by various companies. And then, the game changer was, the agreement which, some companies signed on supply of, COVID medicine, which is Remdesivir. So, Gilead Life Sciences give licenses to almost 9 Indian companies to, ensure that there is a sustained supply. But yes, there were challenges because you have to develop the technology, then transfer this technology to manufacturing site, and then ensure that all parameters, safety parameters are met. So yes, there were challenges, but I think there have been a new learning for pharma, like how to ensure overall, availability of all the aspects which are required for, sustained supply. Yes, it has been learning also, and there have been good opportunities also. So collaborations also.
Yeah, sure. And Priya, do you think that telemedicine has taken over, and the chances of telemedicine becoming prevalent and becoming accepted would be a norm, coming post-COVID era?
Neeraj, I think it's become a part of life. It's become a way of life for doctors, right? I wouldn't say it will take over. The hybrid model will continue, and OPPI has just published recently a paper in which they have looked at, there will be 3 scenarios. There will be the rep, which is, the doctors which are working in a hybrid model. There will be all those who adopt technology and are going to look at access to patients from a telemedicine model. And there will be those who are very comfortable continuing face-to-face. But I think the differential factor here will be on what they can provide. So there have been, pros and cons and responses that we have heard from customers. One of the things that has come in is, yes, it's great because it allows you to, manage your time well. You are able to sort of define. And I think traditionally we have been very much a touch-based country. Culturally we would like to have a connect to the doctors. But telemedicine is allowed to have that uninterrupted connect as well. I'm not saying it has taken away the physical concept, but it has allowed that uninterrupted connect to happen. Having said that, I think from the doctor and patient point of view, there are quite a few conditions where they would want to still have a face-to-face connect, and that will continue. You can see that with the OPDs opening up and with things streamlining, people are back. They are back in the hospitals. They are trying to consult. But more chronic conditions, more things which is a maintenance kind of a thing where you visit a doctor for just feedback. I think that kind of things will continue. Diabetes, for example, has taken off in that direction. You can hear many doctors speaking about that. Contrast oncology, you probably want to go and see a doctor, for whatever remedies that you want to take care of. Also, I think the platforms that were offering telemedicine have learned to do it differently. Instead of just focusing on one aspect, they have also sort of become a universe and an ecosystem by themselves. So you have a payment gateway, you have something which will direct you to a pharmacy, something which will help you in an earlier diagnosis. Diagnostics have tied in. So you have one new ecosystem that has come in. Collaboration, as Dinesh was mentioning, has become the order of the day, and you could see it in telemedicine as well. Plus, I think the leveraging and apprehensions that people had about technology and how it would come in from a regulation point, that also has eased out a bit with the government, allowing telemedicine and e-prescription to have its validity. So those things have sort of accelerated in this period, and I think it is there to stay.
And one of the audience has come up with a question. Priya, probably you might be the right person to guide us on that. So Praveen has asked us a question that how digital friendly are HCPs in India? So is there any difference between Tier 2, 3 cities or government hospital doctors and private doctors, practicing at their own clinics?
So Praveen, very good question. And I think I just alluded to it earlier, saying that the myth that we had is that the doctor is an being which is different from the other being. But the same doctor is using the technology to sort of order online stuff and, do other materials. We have a team which has an outreach program to Tier 2 to 6 cities where we meet some of those customers. We were pleasantly surprised to see their kind of adoption of technology. See, because a mobile phone is something that is available with everyone today. We have those touch points. We have about 45 million users which are there, who are linked, who are connected. 450 million users. So if you have those touch points which are available, then where they use it is a matter of behavior change. And like I mentioned, people will still prefer a face-to-face interaction. I'm not saying the face-to-face interaction will go away, but they're making choices. Do I need to make those 3 interactions? Do I need to have them? The second point, which is very valid, Praveen, for you over here, is how are you using those interactions? I think pharma went into an overdrive, and I would say this with, I can see a lot of doctors on the call as well, and they would empathize with what I'm saying. We just use, I think, death by webinar. That's what happened. Everybody saw WhatsApp as a platform, webinar as a platform, went into the doctor chamber and said, okay, now here, we are here. And this is what we want to adopt. And as a customer, I would not want to do it. I don't want to have those pesky messages coming in. So what do I do, which is going to be content specific? What is the content repurposing omni-channel strategy that you had in digital where you were able to get that access? And I think that has probably defined a lot as to how doctors have accepted it. So that's something that pharma is picking up, and it's going to be here to stay from where I can see.
And Dr. Dinesh, if we talk about a broader term used in most of the pharma, which is innovation. So what do you feel? I mean, what's the difference between pre and post-COVID innovation happening in pharma companies at various levels? I mean, it could be R&D, it could be production, warehouse, logistics, anything. So broadly, innovation, how's that going to change post-COVID?
Okay. So Neeraj, very interesting question. So, so pre-COVID time, innovation. So at that time, the desired activity was, we should have a right therapy for treatment of COVID-19. And at the same time, we should have a, desired vaccine with the adequate, shelf life and quality and safety attributes. So in pre-COVID time, because, you have seen that various companies are going to launch their vaccines. So Corona was identified in December 2019 in China, and in December 2020, two companies, Moderna and Pfizer, they have already secured emergency use authorization from US FDA. Now the speed, we can see the speed by which companies have launched the product in countries like US and others. Now, this is not possible, because a single company cannot develop it actually. So what they have done, they have collaborated, they, pooled their resources, and then, they took at the problem and they come up with a scientific solution, like how we can get, the various attributes delivered on time, and at the same time, it remains safe. So in pre-COVID time, the companies were looking at literature search, they were going through patent literatures, like how, and effective, this vaccines can be designed. So companies were, they screened various strategies, available strategies on vaccine. But the vaccines which are now coming, they are based on a novel principle, which is on, messenger RNA type of process. So both, Pfizer, they have used this technology, and basically it's a nanoparticle technology. And, they designed their dosage form based on their earlier patents. So they filed some patents in 2013, then 2018, they used that knowledge. And then another challenge was, availability of the strain. So right strain for treatment of, for production of the vaccine. So again, they come with the existing techniques. So what I can say, in pre-COVID time, the focus was what is the problem? So they identified the problem, and then with due diligence, they come up with their solution. They make their specification. Okay, we require these 10 attributes in the proposed dosage form, and I believe 60 to 70% they have been successful. And in the apart from designing, so that was the designing aspect. So another is how we can transfer that technology, because in R&D we are developing 2,000 doses, 3,000 doses. Now you have to convert it into 2 lakh doses, 3 lakh doses. So that scale up have number of challenges. And one single vaccine, the manufacturing timeline is from 5 to 6 days, and then distribution challenges are there. So companies are identifying each and every stage, and they are coming up with the novel solutions and right solutions. And still, I think it's a science. Lot of activities we will see in next 2 years, because there are still unsolved and unmet need is there, unsolved questions are there. So which we need to focus. But yes, from innovations perspective, yes, we have seen a lot of innovation by using the older knowledge in a right way to get the answer. Thank you.
Great.
Dinesh, can I add to what Dinesh said?
Sure, Priya.
Absolutely. So Dinesh, just one point here that, out of the startups that are there for healthcare today, and if you're talking of innovation, about 5,000 startups were there at the end of 2019.
Absolutely.
And that number has sprung up to more than 7,000 at the end of 2020. That's the speed at which people are accessing. And just to allude to the previous question also, I just got reminded that, about 50% of the startups are accessing innovation to reach out to patients in tier 2 to tier 6 cities. So that's the kind of adoption that is happening for innovation. Plus, India has been an innovative country. We call it Jugaad, but that's what it has been. It's been there. From a point that, I can remember at least about a decade ago, there was for access of medicines to patients, which remains a bigger challenge for many of the patients, for the healthcare providers. There was a train that is called Lifeline Express that runs now, which goes to every station. There are specialists within there, and they are sort of working with the villagers over in that local area, providing medications. And you had oncologists, you had neurologists. There are doctors who are dedicated to provide this. So those kind of things are happening. Modern medicine is happening. Hospitals are, looking at VR, AI, big data, IoT, blockchain. Everything is coming in. R&D, Dinesh can tell us, is looking at data, big data analytics in a very, very big, very, very major way today. So is also happening at the commercial end of the operations. We are looking at how data can now provide us the, precision targeting for customers, like we want to get into precision medicine or with genomics. So there's huge lot that's happening within the space.
Yeah. So yes. So I think yes, digitalization is there. Digitalization has really facilitated various activities, right from manufacturing, R&D, then commercialization, supply chain. But there is one negative aspect of digitalization. So recently there is a news on cyber attacks. So on 10th December there was a news that Pfizer has launched with the European Medicine Agency, who was reviewing the dossier, the regulatory dossier, wherein all the technical know-how detail is there about the vaccine. So now that was that was the safety of that data was compromised. So I believe with the innovation, pharma is important, but at the same time innovation in digital area. So I think proper safeguard is required from pharma industry perspective, because innovation can be positive also, innovation can be negative also. But yes, positivity, we need to ensure that positive innovation is there, and negative innovation like cyber security, cyber theft, such type of activities, we need to ensure that there should be a control, because this is again a very big learning in COVID time, because companies like Dr. Reddy, Lupin, and Pfizer, and many others, they have faced those cyber attacks. So, proper solutions are there from IT team, IT professionals. Pharma is doing their bit, but that is very important.
Yeah, and with all this great advancements, startups, artificial intelligence, big data coming in, Priya, do you still think India can match the global standards of vaccination?
So I think the task cut out for us is humongous. I don't think it's about the global standard. It's about the task that has been cut out for us. And if you ask me, the biggest challenge that we will have is not about getting the vaccine. It's going to be about the logistics, about crowd management, and about administration. I think those three areas will be where we will have a significant difficulty. If I was to just draw on my experience in global public health and in the infectious diseases areas and vaccines, I can tell you this, that with pulse polio, with the DTP, the routine immunization UIP that we use, as well as with the area of TB or HIV where I had worked, where you have a repetitive intervention that is required. The infrastructure is there. I think we have a lot of public-private areas that people can work around. So, for example, I saw some brilliant work that was done by ASHA workers when they were looking at TB and reaching out for TB, and then they would sort of superimpose that with HIV, the kind of collaborative work that happened there, where you actually had to drag out the patient from their home and tell them take the medication, right? That's kind of the story, to a point where we will have willing patients. But if you ask me, do we have options? Yes, we have options. So let me just kite fly over here. I know Dr. Ganguly is not here, so I will use that opportunity to throw some ideas on the table. I think we have a fantastic infrastructure of postal offices, railways, where we can look at, both from a reach point of view as well as from an point of vaccination, where we can leverage those. The second area where I think that we could probably look at vaccination coming up with technology, of course, we have the eWIN platform, which government has already used to have information that is flowing in. But the electoral process that we use every year is a technology process. And I just heard the Prime Minister talk about it a couple of days ago. But people in the pharma circles have been speaking of this, saying, can you use that to identify which people have got the vaccine and not got the vaccine? From a storage point, I know we are looking at different vaccines, and some of them we are saying we will use between 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. But even if we need to go into cold storage, I think public-private partnerships with private companies which deal with frozen foods could be a great area for us to look at points where we can have vaccinations coming in. E-commerce players, as I've mentioned, have had a fantastic penetration. Can they be a conduit for us to reach out to vaccines right to the last mile? And people have been buying in. There have been warehouses, there have been storage points that are coming in. We have our own aggregators here who have sort of looked at even small Kirana stores where they have aggregated them to have a platform whereby you can have a single point of purchase. So is there a possibility to sort of rope them in and build those partnerships to take the vaccination further? And importantly, I think it will also be about the communication on how we want the vaccine, because it's again asking people to come for not 1 but 2 doses, no matter what vaccine we are using. And therefore, in that period, are they going to come in? Is the immunity going to be good? What happens with the social distancing? And previous experience has shown that, if you work with some of these local panchayats, you work with people who are there, who are influencers in the village. We saw the use of celebrity in Pulse Polio campaign, how it actually brought us support in the way the Pulse Polio vaccination took place, from 54% to nearly 80%, which was a huge jump in a period of 10 years. So those kind of, I think, influencers, and if I would say people who can sort of make a difference to how we think about vaccination will be required. The biggest challenge comes in that, is there an access point? Is it close by? And if I think that problem is sorted out, then you can at least get to the point of vaccine. Of course, I'm not even going to get into the area of how it is going to get administered, and do we have enough medical staff to administer that kind of vaccines? And that, I think that's another challenge that we are going to be grappling with. But Dr. Ganguly probably will be a better person to tell us about how the government is thinking on that. Dinesh, over to you for your comments.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so yes, I agree with the Priya on her views, and yes, I agree Priya, with you.
Yeah, I got a call from Dr. Ganguly. He was not able to join in, and probably because of some link issues or logins and passwords and all. So probably he might jump into some other webinar or a call in a couple of minutes from now. I think there were a couple of questions parked in for specifically for him. Priya, if you can answer that, that'll be good for the audience also.
I'll attempt, but it's a miss. I think we should get him to have his views written down and sent.
No, I apologize to him, and because of some technical glitches and all, because technology sometimes is very bad for some individuals. The same link worked for you, but the same link didn't work for Dinesh and Dr. Ganguly later on.
Yeah, and he was there like 10 minutes before the call, so I think it's just a matter of
Yeah. I mean,
serendipity.
it's our bad luck we couldn't get him on board, and it is a miss for the audience also. If he would have been here, things would have been totally different, and we would have heard a lot of uh, other stuff related to government initiatives and other stuff, because he's a WHO advisor to government initiatives. But anyhow, that's our bad luck. We'll probably request him and put some easy technology maybe for some other webinar later on in future.
Dinesh, there you go. One of the problems of digitalization.
Yeah. So I mean, I had certain questions for Dr. Ganguly also. So Priya, would it be price or efficacy in terms of vaccines? Because each of the vaccine has got their own efficacy, own pricing and all. Would it be central or a state government? Call to pick and choose a vaccine. I don't know. I know it's a very difficult question for you, being at a corporate end, to answer that. But you had been part of some vaccine programs earlier also. So how does all these things play in their role?
So I think, Neeraj, to answer that question, and I don't think I have a straight answer, so let me be upfront to say that it's a choice between a moral answer and what is good to do versus what is the realistic thing that is on the ground. So I think, and I would not represent any organization, because I think so let me just put it here. These are my personal views. So I think it's about what are we attempting to do with the vaccine. I think pharma has sort of accelerated to the best possible. All of us sitting in this business know coming out with vaccines at such a short notice is not an easy task at all. And therefore, to probably bring in a vaccine at this speed in 9 months, it's an eye-opener. It's really an eye-opener for a lot of us who have been associated with these therapeutic areas. Having said that, everything comes at a cost, right? If the pharma is putting in efficiency engine behind this, they are willing to probably invest resources behind this initiative. But a lot of companies have also, like whether we look at some of the companies which are there within India, they have spoken of a $2 to $3 price range or $3 to $4 price range broadly. I don't know what it will land in when we come in now. Where versus maybe a $20 vaccine which is coming from a different technology. So it is going to be about what choice of technology of the vaccine are you willing to use versus what programs are you going to, what are you going to do? A broader question to answer is, what are we trying to achieve with the vaccination? Yeah, because I think the whole gamut globally, one is to save lives, second is to get sure that your life is back to normal, or at least near normal, if you could, pre-COVID scenario. So if that is the criteria, then probably safety and efficacy, I think, will be prime for most of the people who are taking a vaccine. Me as a consumer, I would also want to have a vaccine which is efficacious and safe, rather than worry about whether it's the price that needs to be taken into consideration. Governments are doing their bit. I think all governments across the globe are putting in efforts to make sure that they can subsidize it to the best possible. Companies are doing their bit. A lot of companies have said that they are going to make a not-for-profit kind of a thing. They're going to make sure that access is got done, just recovering their costs. And I think that's a fair game to play with. Just one more point here, and I think it's about most models which look at price versus efficacy, look at a cost effectiveness modeling that we do, or a health economic outcome modeling that we do. So if the health economic outcome is prevention of mortality and morbidity and reducing hospitalization, then what we need to compare the pricing of the vaccine versus the cost of all these three, and what is the disability, average days of living which are going to get impacted versus people who are going to be more productive. So it's again broadly on what you want, what is the goal, what is the objective of the vaccination that you want to achieve. And I guess governments across are saying we want to get people back out into the system. So if that is the case, then I think you marry them, which is done for every possible medicine that you bring in. So the same would be true for vaccines.
There's a related question by one of the audience, Roshni. So she has asked whether citizens would be able to choose if they want to be vaccinated or not. Since it's a virus, it can come back again anytime. Isn't it supposed to be mandatory?
Citizens, so I think the government latest guideline I was reading, and Dinesh, please fill us in if you have updates. I think yesterday the statement that has come out is it's going to be a choice for the individual to get vaccinated or not vaccinated, and I think it's primarily on account of also the fact that you would want to see which prime line that you want to first address, and whether you want to reduce hospitalizations, you want to reduce morbidity, and you want to make sure healthcare workers are protected. As the private individual, I can choose to go for a private vaccination program when it is so available. Currently, if I continue to use my social distancing, masks, etc., and take care of precautionary elements, maybe I can give way to vaccination for somebody else who is more, in the need with comorbidity or, a senior age group, or a more prone or maybe has a more propensity to get COVID. That age group probably gets a preference, and I don't think there is any harm in that. It's about more public health scenarios that you build up.
And Dinesh, would there be challenges at the approval end? I mean, if we have global players coming in India and asking for the vaccine launch, so what problems or what challenges they might have at the drug regulatory affairs or IPR approvals in the country like India?
Okay, so Neeraj, on that front, the first challenge is actually the approved vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. So Pfizer vaccine require a storage of -80 to -60 degree centigrade temperature, and then Moderna vaccine, it requires a temperature of almost -18 degree to 2 to 8 degree. So still, these companies from manufacturing perspective, they are still fine tuning the stability or shelf life. Now the biggest challenge here will be the to maintain the cold storage. So like this Pfizer vaccine, they require dry ice. We call it as a dry ice, which is ensuring the temperature remains in that stipulated range. So that challenge will be there. So government will critically review like how distribution will be done. What are the challenges in the manufacturing, because product is lyophilized. So that need to be reconstituted with the proper diluent. So all these aspects we need to government need to see. Another interesting aspect will be, which is even highlighted at a US FDA meeting also. So basically, at present the data is for patients with 17 years plus age, but there is no data as of now on patients with 17 years or of less age. So that safety related data, even for Pfizer's vaccine, there were 2 or 3 person who opposed approval. One of them was from India actually, who was from US FDA, and they said that there is a need that we need to ensure that that age group is properly directions are given. Third aspect is the drug interaction plus adverse events. So again, still it's we are at a learning phase. Like adverse events are there. There are anaphylactic reactions for some of the vaccines, and so whenever any approval will be given, government will consider all those. And last thing, there is an interesting news one of my colleagues shared with me today. So Adar Poonawalla, the head of one of the vaccine program head, he has requested government that in case of any death during treatment with this vaccine, pharma company should not be held liable, because class action suits are prevalent in US market and other bigger countries, and they are saying that in case of any adverse event to selected individual, government should those individuals should not come and sue them, and because the damages are, equivalent to company's cost. So in US that has been waived, but in India, still I think clarity is not there. So there are many aspects which government will see from regulatory perspective, and another aspect will be because at present in the world 200 plus vaccines are under development. Almost 56 are clinical stage, wherein which are expected in next 6 months. And third thing is dose route. So routes available are intramuscular, subcutaneous. Even some are attempting intranasal, some are attempting oral. Government will give due weightage on all those aspects. Another important thing is one of Indian company is developing a vaccine which is stable at room temperature. So I think that will be the desired one, because that will be important for India plus 90 plus African and other countries wherein temperature remains above 25 degrees. So all these parameters government will see, and again I would say at present scientific data is only 40 to 50%, basis which in interest of people government will give approval, may give approval. But yes, it's a science. For next 3 or 4 years, it will be crucial. There is a need that everything is tracked. Last part you said IPR. So from IPR's perspective, whatever vaccines have been developed, so they are protected with the IP, with patents expiring till 2035. From IPR's perspective, many companies have waived their IP. Like one is AstraZeneca has a tie-up with Oxford, so it's basically drug development with a collaboration between industry and academia. And Oxford has waived any rights on commercial rights. So then AstraZeneca has pledged that whatever they will sell, it is no profit, no loss basis. Second is Pfizer BioNTech, they developed the vaccine, and they got 400 million funding from government, and they are expected to make $4 billion from whatever sale they are going to do. And they have faced the litigation from a US company by the name Allele Biotech. So Allele Biotech has designed a testing kit which is checking which can check the efficacy of prepared vaccine. So they have initiated a legal action. Legal action was initiated in October. So yes, there are litigations also, because whosoever company is developing a new vaccine, they are protecting their monopoly by filing of IP, intellectual property rights. That is what I said. They have a IP till 2035. But many companies during this COVID era have decided to waive off their IP rights for certain times. So till the pandemic is there, there are classical example, AbbVie Biopharm, Gilead Life Sciences. So many bigger companies, they have at present they are not into money making mode. Their primary objective is that to serve the mankind. So all aspects are there, but yes, there is a need that future tracking should be done, because again, it's a science. A lot of learning is required on this domain. Thank you.
And I think we got some questions in between.
One point, and then just to add to what Dinesh was saying, beautifully articulated. I think there are 235 vaccine candidates that are running for approval. Normally, this could have taken us maybe 2 decades or 3 decades to screen data and come out. And we are all expecting it to be done in a period of 1.5 years. So I think from the other side, when we are viewing it as consumers, we need to understand that there is a very different level of work that is getting done to make sure these vaccines reach our hands. It's not as easy. When I hear some conversations that are going on from people who are not in the know, they tend to believe that why is it taking so long? Well, a normal vaccine takes 10 years to reach you. We still don't have cures for things like Ebola and the others which have hit us many, many years ago. Even today, we cannot claim for cure of many of those viruses, whether it's flu or the others. You take an annual shot where it is mutating, so you change the strain that you are in. And we still give our kids the UIP vaccinations, which is the basic vaccinations which I took and my children are taking and their children will take, for a few years. So we should remember the paradigm in which we are viewing the vaccines. It's a very different paradigm from where it's coming in. And therefore, companies also are grappling with the reality that they need to come. So it is an iterative, it is going to be a constant learning process. I think somebody quoted 2 days ago, beautifully written article. He says, and he was talking about US. He says this vaccine is like taking 2 iPhones, putting them in the hands of a person, miles away, and making sure they are cold at different points of time when they have reached. This is exactly what the companies are trying to do. That cost, trying to bring it down, make sure it is there in your hands, and at 28-day intervals, you have them in your hand and cold and cool and administered. So it's going to be a challenge.
Yes.
And
Rightly said.
I think Priya and Dinesh, there were lots of questions in between. So we'll come back to you and we'll open the house for just 1 or 2 questions, quick questions basically. So I got one from Bandit Swain. So with AI in place, can world be ever ready before upcoming pandemic and take preventive action?
Yes, I would say that. I think a lot of work is happening on predictive analytics and prediction of pandemics for the future. Pre-COVID also, there was work happening to predict pandemics. I think we have had some very prophetic. I've heard Bill Gates seminar, it got repeated. It was on WhatsApp all over when COVID hit us, saying, oh, there's going to be a pandemic that's going to come in. But I think it's getting more specific. People are investing resources behind this, knowing that we are going to live in an ecosystem with viruses and bacteria all around us. They can mutate, they can change their mind, probably more frequently than we do in terms of evolution. And there will be a skip from one species to the other. I think it's a part of natural evolution. So we should be ready for that. There have been many in the last 10 years. I remember I was a part when in pharma when the SARS pandemic hit us, and there was India didn't fortunately witness the kind of impact that the other global countries did. But I was in Hong Kong at that time, and I did see what kind of impacts it could bring in and how global organizations were getting ready for it. We are there today, 10, 15 years later. We are seeing COVID. There may be something else that may come some years later. So we will use AI and predictive analytics for sure.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks. Dinesh, please.
Yeah, whatever she said on this aspect, I agree with it.
So any last summary from Priya and Dinesh before we wind up?
Okay,
Dinesh, you want to go first?
So ladies first.
Okay. I think exciting times. Change is the norm now. I think if anybody is feeling that, we can get away with what we were doing earlier, we have experienced in 9 months, it's changing. The dynamics of the world is going to change. The dynamics of how we operate is going to change. Irrespective of which demographic age group you fall under, you're going to see that change. And healthcare is changing and changing for the better. So I think we are going to see a lot of excitement, lot of excitement. I'm very kicked about the way digital and AI is progressing in this area. And I think we will see things that we could only imagine in sci-fi movies for the future. But you will see them happening, probably not as prophetically as the pandemic, but more in the positive direction of, and within India, there you are seeing this, you see papers coming up now. So we are going to see that. We are going to see vaccines, which are going to get more important. On that note, 2 things that caught my attention when we were looking at what's happening from technology. There may be a vaccine for hypertension in the future. So guys, if you're getting BP, you might be able to get vaccinated for that. And there are scarier things where where technology may be able to predict when you die. So when you're going to die. So please look at both aspects that are coming in, but interesting times ahead.
Dinesh.
Yeah. So, okay. So Neeraj, rightly said by Priya. So, I believe, exciting time. Yes, I agree for pharma. There are new challenges. And the point is, the new technology, by using effectively, new solutions will be there. Very important aspect for such type of, future issue. There is a need that there should be, there should be more funding on research on virology, bacteriology, there is a need to check like what type of bacteria exist in a particular atmosphere. Like when one can do searches on slaughterhouses, garbage, so microbiology. So there is a need, because we have been able to not tackle, but still, we have been successful, say 60 to 70%, because we have in the past various in the world at various different locations, scientific knowledge was there, and it was combined to get the right solution. So I believe the resources on health and pharmaceutical sciences research should continue at all end. Second thing is the strain availability. So I think in India there is important, because I was part of some of the meetings. So as I am part of CI National Committee on IP, so I have attended some meetings. So one of the major concern from this vaccine manufacturer was availability of the strain. So government have those strains, but when we sign memorandum of understanding, MOU with government, there are some restrictive legal clauses actually. So that need to be, I think government is now taking corrective ways to ensure that availability of government resources are promptly. Third, so collaboration, I would say this pandemic has, educated everyone that you can fight only collaboratively. So what I have seen in India, government have collaborated with the, pharmaceutical companies at global level, national level. So that have, really helped us in, getting these solutions, getting the right medicine. So I think collaboration should continue. More resources should be put on, this thing on health infrastructure. And, on COVID, I believe it will remain. Yes, we need to ensure that we have the right medicines. Open source learning should remain. Resources should be, regularly reviewed, and so that for any future, such type of issue, we are ready and we are able to save the mankind. Thank you.
I think, Varun, we are already across the time limits. We'll park some questions from the audience to be asked from the speakers later on. So any concluding remarks from you, Varun?
No, I just, so starting by apologizing for the logistical nightmare, also expressing grief over the fact that we couldn't have Dr. Ganguly with us. I think that would have added a lot of value, additional value. But again, thanks Priya, thanks Dr. Dinesh, thanks Neeraj and thanks everyone for participating. This is, I truly, really enjoyed it, and I actually learned quite a few things. Especially Priya with the hypertension medicine coming in. But again, on a serious note, please, our endeavor is to keep on having these conversations on our platform, on our webinars, so more and more people find value. We will have more such events within the pharma industry on certain different topics as we go ahead. We'll hope Priya and Dinesh can join us again for those talks, and hopefully next time it'll be much more smoother. Once again, thanks everyone for being with us on the webinar, and we appreciate if you could just download the app. We've shared the link on the chat. Please feel free to download it and explore the app, and any suggestions are welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you for having us. A pleasure.
Thanks, Priya.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, Varun.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.